And welcome back to another episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We're your hosts, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania, back with another positional breakdown as we get closer to training camp. And today, Michael, we had a bit of a debate last week as to what the weakest position on the team was. And it was between tight end, which we looked at on Thursday. And today we're going to be taking a look at cornerback, which probably takes the cake as far as the weakest position on this roster. Before we hop into the individual players and the overall questions surrounding the group, do you think this is going to be as bad as some people are expecting this to be, with pretty much no veteran presence at that cornerback position?
Well, I think if we're trying to be, if we're looking at this as pragmatically as we can, I think the most realistic way to look at it is that they will struggle, because on paper, there are a lot of teams in the league that do have established starters who have shown that they could play at a high level in the league, or at least at a competent level. And when you're running out an entire team or an entire unit full of young guys who, for the most part, haven't proven much of anything, the most likely scenario is that they are going to struggle. That doesn't mean that they can't play well, that the possibility of that doesn't exist. It absolutely can, especially with the pass rush that they should have up front to help them out, and the coaching staff that they'll be playing under. So it could happen, but if we're being realistic, it makes the most sense to expect that they will struggle, especially at this position, because every position in football, there's an upward trajectory, except maybe running back. But other than that, most positions do struggle as rookies and then trend upward. But that is especially the case at cornerback and just defensive back in general. You look at the rookies last season, how bad they were just in general, both the guys all the way up in the first round, from Okudah to CJ Henderson. And we see this year after year. Rookie defensive backs, it's pretty rare. It obviously happens sometimes, but for the most part, it's pretty rare for rookie corners to play well. And it is a position that does take a few years to trend upward. Even look at the greatest corner who in the history of our team, the Jets, who celebrated his birthday a few days ago in Revis. He didn't hit his peak or started his prime until his third season. So, and that's pretty much a general guideline. So I think it is the most fair to expect that this unit will struggle. Doesn't mean that they can't play well. That chance is definitely there. But most likely, I think that it is going to be a rough season for them.
It's important to note, though, on Revis, though, that he certainly flashed within his first two seasons, especially 2008.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, he was already...
did. It's just that, in terms of the progression arc, and he's obviously an outlier of an example because he was so great, but he was definitely good and showed flashes his first two seasons, but just the arc that he had in terms of, starting out rookie season, not the best of your career, get better, and then peak down the line is pretty typical for what defensive backs tend to do.
Yeah, the exciting part about this unit is it's all youth. I mean, there's no Morris Claibornes or Tremaine Johnsons or any vets like that are just going to take reps away. And youth is always fun because it's like scouting, essentially. You just get to watch a bunch of young guys who've never played before and see if anybody pops. So that's the fun side of it. But I will say, out of all this youth at that cornerback position, there's nobody that was picked before day 3 on the draft. So it's not like it's high quality youth. Like, it's one thing that Elijah Vera-Tucker is going to be a rookie on an offensive line, but he was the 14th pick in the draft. There's an expectation there that at worst, the Jets should be getting a solid player. Granted, many of these corners or some of these corners could end up to be solid NFL players, but the Jets haven't invested in this position. Let's just put it that way. But there are two reasons, I guess I would say, to be hopeful, or two arguments that I've heard. And one, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but before we get into the players, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. The two reasons are, one, the scheme, Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich's scheme lends itself. It takes pressure off the corners. It's a lot of zone coverage. It's a lot of sitting back, keeping your eyes on the quarterback. I guess that's the best way to describe it, is just to say that these corners aren't going to have to carry this defense. I mean, it's built from the front to the back. It's built on getting pressure and sitting back in zone coverage. So Bryce Hall or Bless Austin, whoever, won't be necessarily tasked with being a Darrelle Revis and following a team's best receiver, playing much man coverage. And the other thing is that the Jets have a pretty outstanding coaching staff with a good record on developing players and players in the back end. How confident, Michael, are you in those two things alleviating some of the youth that the Jets have at this position?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to help. And I think it's part of the reason they felt okay with putting the secondary on the back burner this year, is because Both the scheme and just the talent of the pass rush is really going to help, because the better your pass rush is, the easier the job is for the back end. You don't have to cover for as long. It's the plays where the quarterback is all day to throw, where it's really tough to thrive in coverage. And even in a scheme where you're going to be playing a lot of zone, um, even if it's not as difficult as playing man to man and necessarily, if you're playing zone coverage and you're not creating a pass rush, then you're going to get picked apart. But if you're playing zone and your pass rush is playing really great, that's when you could start to play a little more aggressively, make some plays. And then overall, your job becomes a lot easier because the quarterback will be getting the ball out quick, checking the ball down. And all you really have to do is play your assignment, don't blow it, and then come downhill and make a tackle. So I think this is, like you said, a scheme that lends itself to making the job easier on the cornerbacks, to where they don't necessarily have to win battles as much in terms of like just go man up with that guy and lock him down. There isn't a ton of that. It's mostly just communication and camaraderie and chemistry, working together and executing the coverage as a unit. And the pressure for the defense to succeed is on the defensive front. It's on them to power the success. That's where the X factor of this defense is going to be. If the Jets aren't creating a pass rush, it's going to be really hard for them to succeed. But if they are, then they can be in pretty good shape, even with the inexperience in the secondary. So I think this is a good situation to have a group like this.
Yeah, it's about as best of a situation you can with the amount of youth and experience at the spot. Let's hop into these players. And first and foremost, Bryce Hall, who there's a lot of optimism about. I mean, I know you're very high on him. Is this warranted? I mean, because I think we had a lot of similar hype heading into it. We're going to talk about Bless Austin next. But last year, Bless Austin had a pretty solid 2019 season. He had his moments, he had his downs or whatever. But it was, okay, we're excited to see how he progresses in 2020. And obviously, his 2020 wasn't anything to write home about. Do you think Bryce Hall's excitement and optimism around him is warranted? And do you think he's a guy who can carry the load of being the cornerback one on this roster?
Yeah, I think we have to avoid being revisionists and just admitting that a lot of us were pretty high on Bless Austin. I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I know I was, and I think you were also. So we were definitely high on him, and it didn't work out in year two, and it could turn around in the future. But um, I think that we definitely shouldn't look back and try to reverse what we thought. We did like Bless Austin. It didn't work out in year two. But with Bryce Hall, I think there are some reasons to think that it can be different, and that it is different right now than the promise with Austin was last year. I feel like with Austin, a lot of his promise was the fact that there weren't necessarily a ton of awesome reps for him. It was just that he put up pretty good numbers because he didn't give up too many big plays. But then once he did kind of get targeted near the end of the season, there were some other injuries on the defense, and then the Dolphins, the Ravens, and of course the Steelers game where he got benched. Then he did start to get picked on a little bit, and obviously he finished the season getting benched, which is not a good indication. That did not happen with Bryce Hall, but he didn't make a ton of awesome plays. He was tackling pretty decently, which he didn't carry over this season because he missed a lot of tackles, and he's just playing his role, not giving up big plays. With Bryce Hall, I feel like we saw a lot more impressive, really legitimate reps with him against good talent too. In the Chargers game, against Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, he did struggle against Darren Waller, but he had some good reps against Devontae Parker. A matchup where he did give up some production, but a lot of those catches were really contested by Hall. But he had a lot of reps against really good players to start out his career, which I don't think Austin did. He's playing the Giants, Washington, Miami, not good teams to start out his career at all. And Bryce Hall was out there playing against, I mentioned the Chargers, the Dolphins, he played the Seahawks. He's matching up against Darren Waller and the Raiders. He had a lot of tough matchups to start his career. And in a lot of them, he showed some legitimate promise. And he had some really good man reps too. Les Austin really didn't have that. It was mostly just, like I said, in zone coverage, just not giving up big plays, making tackles. Bryce Hall had some good, really good man reps against some of the good competition that I mentioned. So I feel like it's a lot more legitimate in that respect. And then there's also the pedigree aspect of it. Hall was obviously a fifth round pick, just like Austin was a sixth round pick, but Hall did have borderline first round, second round talent until he dealt with the injuries that knocked his stock down. So I feel like there's a little bit more raw talent and pedigree with Hall than there was with Austin. So I think those are some of the reasons that Hall's rookie year promise could turn out to be more legitimate than Austin's was. I'm not going to downplay Austin's rookie season. I did like it a lot, and I thought he was going to break out in his second season. And it didn't happen, so I'm not going to completely diminish it. But I think there are some legitimate reasons Hall's rookie season was truly more impressive.
Yeah, and he had some pretty flashy plays as well. The interception he had against the Rams was impressive. There's no other way to put it.
And I didn't mention the Rams either. That's another good offense he played against.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think he was certainly more battle tested than Bless Austin. I think he flashed a little bit more, and like you said, his pedigree was higher. Even though he was a day 3 pick like Austin, he probably should have been a day 2 pick. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to watch him develop. I think the thing with both Hall and Austin is that on the surface, they're both pretty good scheme fits. I mean, the times we did see Bless Austin succeed in 2019 was a lot of the Tampa 2 stuff that Greg Williams was doing, more zone coverage. It was when Bless Austin was in man coverage. I mean, that Steelers touchdown he allowed before the end of the half, which is the one he got benched for. That's where you saw Bless Austin struggle, and his back was to the quarterback. But when he got to keep his eyes in the backfield, look, he didn't have the highest success rate tackling, but he's certainly a feisty tackler. He goes in there, probably should lay back a little bit on the gas. I mean, he really does buy into the all gas, no break mantra even before Saleh was here. And a lot of times that ended with him missing tackles. But he's a willing tackler. And I think Bryce Hall showed some tremendous ability to get to the line of scrimmage and make tackles there and stopping wide receiver screens and outside runs as well. And that's a big emphasis for this cornerback room is you have to be able to tackle, just like the receivers have to be able to block on the offensive side of the football for this team. The corners need to be able to play the run. And limit those outside running attacks. You mentioned, and we just talked about Bless Hall, Austin a little bit. And certainly he didn't make the jump in year 2 that maybe we were hoping for. Granted, it was a pretty bad situation to be in. But it does sound like you're writing him off a little bit. I mean, did you see anything in his film year 2 that you thought was really discouraging? Or do you think there's still an opportunity for Bless Austin and a different defense with his coaching staff to take that leap?
Well, I think with the tackling, like you mentioned, he kind of is too aggressive.
He's like Calvin Pryor.
Yeah, it's completely hit or miss. When he does hit them, they're really nice finishes because he's going so hard. He usually dives head first, which is not what you want to do. And when it does work out, it gets on the highlight reel. But what doesn't get on the highlight reel, what doesn't get remembered, is how many tackles he misses because he's tackling that way. And that's why he's had one of the highest missed tackle rates in the league in each of the last 2 years. So I think for him, the best approach would be to sacrifice those highlight hits because we know he's willing. He gets down there and he wants to tackle, and that's good. But he should just let off the gas a little bit, do the opposite of the Saleh mantra, and just wrap the guy up, square him up, keep your head up, and just wrap him up. He doesn't have to make those big hits all the time because the big hits are not worth the tackles you miss. The missed tackles have a bigger negative effect than the really nice finishes have a positive effect. So I think that's the biggest thing for him. He's got to improve the tackling. But I think you're right. This is probably the best scheme to unleash him. But it's just there is a lot of technique and coverage stuff. Like he has a tendency to, when he's turning with the receiver over the middle, a lot of times he'll turn his back and do a complete 180 turn to the outside. And that's not what you want to do. He got beat on that a few times. So I think there are some things in coverage that, were legitimate weaknesses last year. So I'm not sure if he's going to be able to ever become a good starter in the league, but can he become a guy who is a good depth piece, maybe a decent cornerback too this year while they look for a long-term guy? Potentially, but I think it all has to come with that tackling because right now he's really not a good tackler. He's missing too much for this role. Because like you said, cornerbacks have to be able to tackle in this defense. It's designed so that is a primary part of their role, just playing in the flat, coming downhill, making tackles. So if you're missing a lot, then you're not a good scheme fit. And that's what he's been doing. So, but he does have the potential to be a good tackler, and we've seen that. So he just has to clean it up, which is easier said than done. But if he can clean up the tackling, which I think he can because he's great length, great size, and he's a strong guy too, then I think he can be a decent depth piece, but I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit in terms of him becoming a good keeper long term.
I think the thing that Bryce Hall also showed over Bless Austin when you compare their rookie seasons is, well, when you look at this solid defense, obviously size is super important, not just because of the tackling you're mentioning, but just the type of coverage they want to employ. But I would say having good eyes is probably the most important trait that any of these corners can have. They have to be able to understand which zone they're going to play and have to be able to react and quickly. And I think Bryce Hall definitely showed maturity despite being a rookie in his diagnosis of plays. Obviously, he got burned plenty of times. But Bless Austin, it does seem like it seems like Bryce Hall, his football IQ was fairly high for a rookie, where Bless Austin can't necessarily say that he had that. But Michael Carter II, who's the third corner we want to talk about here, who may end up being the third starter, if we're assuming right now that Bryce Hall and Bless Austin are your two outside starters, the battle for the slot corner position seems to be tilting to Michael Carter II's way. He was a draft pick by Joe Douglas this season. When you watch his college tape, Michael, is there anything there you see that makes you believe he can start day one? And what exactly do you think Saul and Ulbrich will task from their nickel corner this year?
Yeah, it's definitely going. And based on OTAs, it seems like that he's really in that mix right there with Javelin Guidry to compete for that, which I'm sure we'll talk about later once we get to him. But it definitely seems like even though he wasn't, when you look at the draft rankings and leaderboards, he kind of wasn't even close to where he got drafted. A lot of boards didn't even have him, at least on the internet. But it does seem like that he has the talent and the production to deserve to have gotten drafted earlier than he did. His slot numbers in coverage for Duke last season were excellent. He was really good covering the slot, gave up extremely good numbers in coverage. So his production in the slot is really promising. I think from an instincts perspective, that's definitely there. And that's a big part of playing slot in this defense. You're going to be targeted on a lot of screens, and you want to be able to get out in front of that and make sure you could, even if you don't make the tackle, just put yourself in the right spot to channel screens towards your reinforcements behind you. And you're also the slot corners. I think Brian Poole really showed a lot of the traits, who I wish they re-signed. I don't know why another team hadn't signed him, but I think Poole showed a lot of the things you want to see out of a slot corner, just in general. His tackling was really solid and efficient. His instincts were very good against the run. In zone coverage, he was outstanding, always knew where to be, and was great at breaking downhill, making tackles, and just not letting plays get further downfield. So a lot of those things they just mentioned aren't even necessarily just man-to-man coverage. It's just tackling, breaking downhill, playing smart, taking good angles, things like that. And I think Carter II does have a lot of those traits. So it'll be interesting to see if he can come in and make an impact right away.
Yeah, for the vast majority of the offseason, it sounded like you and I both thought that they would bring in at least one veteran corner, if not two. And it wasn't really until Robert Saleh spoke to the media in May that kind of turned that expectation around. It sounds like, what he learned in Seattle is you play these young guys, he referred to as hell on wheels. They're going to be lumps. But by the end of the season, these guys will have developed. They'll all have had game reps. And you can really have built a foundation for this position because somebody in this unit has to hit. But I agree with you. I mean, I think if the Jets were in a win now situation, Brian Poole would be one of the first calls I'd make. But the situation the Jets are in, I mean, I think the goal for Robert Saleh is playoffs, but I don't think that's the expectation. And I think Michael Carter II, they really like, might as well give him some reps year one. He's going to make mistakes, but by the end of the season, who knows how he'll be playing. And with Brian Poole, it's just another 1 year stopgap. And if you believe Michael Carter II can be your long-term solution at the nickel spot, why not give him reps from day one? Now, after those top three, it gets a lot more confusing. Exactly who will be playing and how many reps they'll be playing and who's exactly competing with Bless Austin for that number 2 outside cornerback spot. But I guess we should just start with Jason Pinnock, who is the first corner that the Jets had drafted. Or actually, I believe Michael Carter II was first, but Jason Pinnock, big outside corner from Pitt, certainly has traits of a Robert Saleh cornerback, but is still raw and unrefined. What do you think? What are your expectations for his rookie season? Do you think he'll play, and do you think he'll play meaningful snaps, or do you think this is going to be a situation where he's further down the depth chart, playing special teams, maybe gets in a few games.
I actually think Pinnock would be my pick to start right now. I really do, just because of the lack of quality competition, and I think he is a really good scheme fit with that size and length. Makes him the type of guy who can match vertically and also come downhill and make those tackles you want him to make. So with Pinnock at Pittsburgh, and Joe Blewett kind of talked about it on his film breakdown. It's like you'd see some reps that are just picture perfect, exactly as you want it done, and then you would see him get toasted and give up a couple deep touchdowns. And his numbers kind of line up with that. He gave up a lot of production. He gave up 5 touchdowns in each of the last 3 seasons, and he gave up over 20 yards of reception, which is really high. But the completion percentage he gave up was extremely low, under 40%. So he was getting beat over the top a lot, but he's also really tightly contesting targets using that length and size, and making some plays on the ball as well. So very boomer bust film, but he's a good scheme fit, and I think that on most other teams he's probably a guy you'd want to develop. But on this team, do I necessarily trust Bless Austin more than I would trust Pinnock right now? From my perspective, probably not. But obviously, the Jets, seeing them in practice would have a better idea of that, whether Pinnock is ready, whether Austin is taking a leap. They know better than we do, but at least based on what Austin showed us last year and Pinnock and how he projects to this scheme, I would definitely think he has a good shot to win that starting job, and he would be my prediction for it right now. So I feel like he can win that starting job.
Yeah, he's exciting to me. I mean, he was a receiver in high school. He has crazy athleticism, crazy vertical, and like you said, he's shown the ability to make plays on the ball, and he's a good scheme fit. But yeah, I think if you're playing Pinnock, you have to know at least the first half of the season there's going to be a lot of lumps, I would expect. But but his ceiling is certainly very high. I mean, the Jets drafted high ceiling guys who fit the scheme. When they went ahead and took 3 corners on day 3, and then also signed Isaiah Dunn. There's 4 rookie corners on this roster, and honestly, they're just hoping one of them lands. I mean, if more than one can land, that'd be great. But I think they're just hoping one can stick. And I like Pinnock's chances. I agree with you. I think he's a guy though that is a good example who the opinion that Jets fans have of Jason Pinnock in September and in December might be a lot different. I think he just needs a lot more reps. But I agree. I mean, he'll have plenty of chances. The good thing about this cornerback room is there's plenty of opportunity to take that job. If somebody really impresses, whether it's an undrafted free agent or a day 3 pick or somebody completely out of the blue, they could start week 1. There's really nobody cemented in stone, even Bryce Hall. I mean, so anybody can play. So it wouldn't surprise me if Pinnock plays meaningful snaps to start the season. Brandon Echols was the last corner the Jets had drafted. And quite honestly, I don't really know what to expect from him at all. I don't know if he is going to be playing primarily special teams, if he's going to try to push in either the slot cornerback competition between Michael Carter II and Javelin Guidry. Could he push to play some outside reps? I mean, Michael, what do you think of Brandon Echols, and what type of impact do you think he could have in 2021?
Echols is really the biggest wild card of these young cornerbacks. I feel like with the rest of them, we have a pretty good idea of who they are, what they do well, where they could fit into this competition. Carter II is your slot guy. Pinnock is your high upside athlete with great size and length. Who's a good scheme fit, could compete for that outside spot. But Echols is a guy who doesn't really. He can play a lot of different roles, so it'll be interesting to see where he fits in. From a size perspective, you would think he's a slot corner at only 5'10", 180, but he primarily, pretty much entirely played outside corner at Kentucky. And his production was all over the place. He had a great 2019 season, and then 2020, he kind of struggled last year. So it's all over the place with him. The size tells you he's one thing, but his role in college tells you he's another. His production was up and down. So it will be interesting to see where he fits in. I feel like he's kind of a guy who's just going to stick on special teams, maybe doesn't stick as a key player on defense down the line. I actually compared him to I did an article doing some defensive comparisons for this rookie class, and a guy who I compared him to is someone who's on this Jets roster who we'll talk about more, but Sherrod Neesman with the Falcons, a guy who occasionally plays defense and is just a key backup, is never a starter, but is a consistent special teams guy. That's what Niesman was for the Falcons. He didn't really play defense at all until a few years into his career. And then once he did, he was a consistent backup. He was never a starter for them, but he was there for, I believe, 6 years with the Falcons. And for the final 4 of those was a backup they relied upon a lot when guys got injured. And I can see that kind of career for Echols, primarily playing special teams, but has the versatility to do a lot of different things in the defensive backfield. And even if he's not talented enough to ever really stick on defense, he can give you a lot as a backup over time. So I feel like that could be where he slides in.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. Out of the 3 of them, Echols was the one that I knew the least about and was, I don't want to say the least excited about, but I think with Pinnock and Carter the second, like you said, I think there's very clear visions for the types of players they can become. Echols has a lot more projection, although Connor Hughes did report that the Jets were extremely high on Brandon Echols. And Isaiah Dunn, who we're going to talk about next, obviously who the Jets signed as an undrafted free agent. There are reports that the Jets really were interested in drafting him, and if they had a 7th-round pick, they may have taken him. But they took Echols over Isaiah Dunn, which is something to remember with all the hype that Dunn is getting. I guess that's a fine enough segue to talk about Isaiah Dunn, who had a great mini camp, who ended up getting starting reps by the end of the mini camp. And granted, it's spring practices. We'll see what training camp practices and preseason games hold. But Isaiah Dunn seems like he has a legitimate chance to not only make the team, but start from day one. Do you think he is, could potentially be this year's Robbie Anderson as terms of an undrafted free agent who makes a team and makes a legitimate impact beginning in year 1?
Yeah, I think there is a pretty good chance for it. Joe Blewett liked his film a lot. He did a great review on Isaiah Dunn. And I was talking to Robbie Sabo, who's at camp, and he thinks Dunn is it's a close competition. Robbie definitely thinks there's a lot of guys involved, but he did a depth chart projection recently, and he had Dunn as the second starter in the outside opposite Bryce Hall. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for him, and that's just the spirit of this room. You have a lot of non-day 1 or day 2 guys competing for these roles, so it's not that crazy for an undrafted free agent to have this chance because the rest of the guys in this room were not invested in too much either. You have no one beyond a 5th-round pick in this room, so everyone's pretty much in the same boat in terms of the investment that was put into them. And you even have guys like Austin who weren't drafted by his general manager. So that could kind of, even compared to an undrafted free agent, put them behind them. So I feel like everyone is just in the same boat, has the same opportunity because there's just 0 proven starters at this position. Bless Austin is your most experienced guy with 16 starts in his career, 1 season's worth. And he was a 6th-round pick of the previous general manager. So it is wide open. I could definitely see Isaiah Dunn taking it. And he's another guy whose film and production kind of makes it curious as to why he didn't get drafted. Another guy who kind of has the zone skills and the size that you kind of want to see in the scheme. So I could absolutely see it. Pinnock is my prediction right now. Start opposite Bryce Hall, but Dunn is right there as well.
Yeah, we've talked about 6 corners, and I think the 7th guy we should mention that Michael and I had a very heated debate before this podcast began. We're talking about Justin Hardy, and I mentioned, well, okay, I mean, the only veteran corner the Jets have is Justin Hardy, and then Michael retorted saying that Justin Hardy was not a veteran because he was drafted in 2017, and I said, well, yeah, I mean, he's played 4 seasons. He's now in his 2nd contract. He's going into 5th season. He's 27 years old, I believe, or older than that, Michael?
27.
He's 27 years old. I was like, why wouldn't he be a veteran? And Michael, I guess
He's not.
What is your argument for him not being a veteran? You're either a rookie. I say
Okay.
in your 3rd season, you can be called a veteran. But if we're really being technical, once you're not a rookie, you're a veteran. There's a difference between seasoned veterans.
Well, I think that's the difference here. You're being really technical with this. You're looking at what does it say in the contract? What is it officially? To me, when I think of a veteran, I think of an older player. I don't think of a guy who's 26, 27, 4th season, 3rd season. I think of guys who have really been through the ringer in the league. Well, that's who I think of as a veteran. So that's why I think 5 seasons is a good number. If you've had 5 seasons in the book, so if you're in your 6th season or later, then I would think about calling you veteran. Usually, usually I keep it for guys who are in their 30s or very close to it. But for the sake of this argument, I guess 5 seasons is a good benchmark. But I think it's subjective if that's how you want to use the term. That's okay with me. I have no reservations issues with that. But for me, a veteran is a much older player than I think how you see a veteran.
You can't just change the definition of the word.
I'm not changing the definition.
Yeah, you are.
It's subjective.
Quinton Williams is a veteran. Now,
No,
is he? Yes, he is. He's a veteran. Now, is he a seasoned veteran? No, he's still a young player, but it's his 3rd season. I mean, he's technically a veteran now. I mean, he should be a captain on this team. Here's the one that we really blew my mind. Marcus Maye. Michael says not a veteran. How is that even possible?
He's in his prime. He's not a veteran.
Yeah, but you can be a veteran in your prime. There's a difference between being a journeyman or a seasoned veteran, hell, even a reliable good veteran. But a veteran player is a guy who's seen some shit. If the average NFL career is only 3 years and you're going into your 5th season, you're on the franchise tag, you've been a captain for 2 years, you've started plenty of games, you've seen it all. Like, there's no Marcus Maye isn't walking around the Jets training facility with his eyes wide open, not knowing what's going to happen next. He's seen it all. He's a veteran. How could you say Marcus Maye is not a veteran?
I think
he's damn near 30.
You have a much more black and white view of it. You're saying that
yeah, because it
veteran. I see more stages. There's rookie, there's young player, there's player in his prime, older player. I think I just have higher standards in terms of the experience that I expect out of a guy.
What's the difference between an older player and a veteran?
I said a guy in his prime. I didn't say older player. Did I say that?
Yeah, you did. You went younger player, older. You went through all your categories. Okay, well
So there's rookies, there's young players, there's guys in their prime, there's guys in the latter portion of their prime.
You can be a young player and be a veteran. You can be
veteran
Patrick
is
Mahomes.
A guy who's on the downswing.
No, that's not right at all. That's just the way you're using it. Patrick Mahomes is a veteran quarterback.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is.
He's not a veteran quarterback.
He's won a damn Super Bowl.
Doesn't make him a veteran.
He signed a $500 million contract. He signed a $500 million contract. What is it? Is his 4th season or is it his 5th season? Why am I spacing? It's his 2017, 2018, 2019, 20. It's going into his 5th season. He didn't play 2017 though. But Michael, I mean,
he's not a veteran.
Ridiculous take. Oh my gosh. Well, anyways, we have a Twitter poll. You can go check it out. Let's see what the numbers are at. Now, I made the mistake of saying what Michael voted because Michael has a bunch of shills that'll just vote for him. So right now, Michael is – yes, you do. You have 15,000 followers. On the poll, so we did what constitutes a veteran. After rookie season has 7%. After second season has 39%. 5+ seasons has 51%. And then age 30 plus is 2%.
People understand.
I will note every reply except for one agrees with me, though. So I think anybody who actually doesn't just read your name and vote. Michael.
I don't think anyone would want to vote just because I did.
You're wrong on that. Okay, well, let's move forward. Justin Hardy. I think he's kind of the forgotten man on this unit because when he was signed, it was my first reaction was, oh, corner. We signed a corner. And then it was, okay, no, he's a special teamer. He's a pretty elite gunner. He'll probably be the special teams captain on this team, beloved in the locker room, but didn't really play too much cornerback per se. Do you think he's getting overlooked for reps at that spot? Do you think there is a chance that the veteran Justin Hardy could play meaningful reps at corner?
I don't. I think he's just here for special teams. He's played 4 seasons in the league and has barely played at all on cornerback, and he's been really bad when he has. So I don't think he's being overlooked for that role. I don't think he'll be in the mix for that, really. But on special teams, he's outstanding. One of the best gunners in the league. Has great speed, great get off. Blockers really cannot hold him. He's great at getting downfield, creating penetration. He's a really good gunner, and they did need that because their punt coverage was bad last season. So I think he'll make a big impact on special teams, but on defense, I would definitely not expect him to play unless it's a severely bad scenario where he just has to play.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, like we just said, I think he'll get plenty of reps and opportunities too, but he was signed here because he's a pretty damn near elite gunner, and I think he's going to help that unit out. And he's a good locker room presence, but I'm sure he'll have an opportunity. Rounding out the cornerback.
He is a good locker room presence, but he doesn't offer veteran leadership.
Must you? Do you really want to fight about this? I can't. I mean, once you said Marcus Maye can't be called a veteran at this point, I mean, that's just bananas. I would accept. I think the middle ground between us would be once you're not under rookie contract, you're officially a veteran, which I think is still wrong, but I would accept that. And in which case, Marcus Maye is playing on his franchise tag, so he's no longer on his rookie contract. So, anyway, tweet us what you think. What constitutes a veteran? Rounding out the cornerback roster, Javelin Guidry, Lamar Jackson, Corey Ballantyne, Zane Lewis, and Elijah Campbell. Look, I mean, when you look at the rest of that unit, am I confident any of those guys really makes the roster? No. But Javelin Guidry is very much in that conversation to make the roster and potentially even start. I think he's the one guy out of those five that I could end up seeing making the roster. Of course, look, if Zane Lewis has an outstanding preseason, I think he could bump somebody off this roster. But I guess when you look at that group, what do you see? Is there anybody? I mean, is Guidry the only guy you could see making this roster?
Well, nothing really intrigues me from the other guys. I guess Lamar Jackson can be in the mix. He's is another guy with really good length. Maybe some of the best length of all the guys in this roster. He definitely has the size. He struggled last season, but he was an undrafted rookie covering DeAndre Hopkins one-on-one, so you would expect that. So I think Lamar Jackson maybe should be getting more talk as a guy who could potentially make the team. I'm not necessarily high on him. There wasn't too much that I liked last year, even though it wasn't a great situation. But he should be in that mix just based on the size alone and the fact that, like we said earlier, no one has a leg up because of pedigree in this group. Everyone is a late round pick or an undrafted player. So I think Jackson should be considered in the mix, although I just don't like his game too much. But Javelin Guidry definitely seems like he's going to compete with MC2 for that starting slot job. And I did
Why wouldn't you just call him MC squared?
MC2. It's better.
No, what do you mean that's better?
Isn't that did Saleh not call him that once? I feel like Saleh did.
Maybe,
call
but
him
MC squared.
Once.
I mean, I get
MC2.
MC squared's like an actual. Okay, well,
although I have used that before, but I guess it's just what
it also makes sense
because
there's already a Michael Carter on the roster, so it would make sense that he's MC squared. Like there's well, whatever. Do you want to talk about the safeties? Is that it for the corners for now?
I wasn't done with Javelin Guidry.
Oh.
You had to interrupt my choice of nickname.
Sorry. Continue.
All right. I will continue Javelin Guidry. So I do like what he showed last year. It was a really small sample. He played less than 200 snaps, and most of those came in 3 games. But he was pretty good when he was out there. He showed a knack for playmaking. He had 4 forced fumbles, which is absolutely insane for how little he played. If anyone had 4 forced fumbles in a season, if you played every snap all year and you got 4 forced fumbles, that's a lot. For you to get 4 forced fumbles in 170 snaps is insane. He's not going to maintain that, but if he can force 1 or 2 a season, that'd be great. But even outside of the fumbles, he tackled really well, and he did a lot of the stuff that I talked about with Brian Poole that makes you a good slot corner. Just being able to drop into your zone, make tackles, not give up yards after the catch, and just not blow coverages and assignments. Just subtle stuff that doesn't really pop off the screen, but over the long run, your team doesn't give up a lot of big plays out of the slot because your slot guy just keeps doing the right thing. And that's what Guidry showed over a small sample, but he did look pretty impressive last year. And I talked about how tough it is to play cornerback as a rookie in this league, how many really highly drafted guys struggled last year. Guidry came in as an undrafted rookie and didn't struggle and had one of the most efficient rookie seasons of all cornerbacks last year. So I'm a fan of Guidry, but I'm also a fan of Carter II. So it's going to be a very interesting battle.
Yeah, I will say it's going to be hard to predict right now who the 6 to 7 corner, hell, even 5 corners on this team will be, just because so much can change with a good preseason. I think Guidry right now is on the outside looking in, the way I see things, but that can certainly change. And like you said, I didn't realize he had 4 forced fumbles. Certainly a more impressive rookie season than I think I realize and some others realize, but I'm sure the Jets and their coaching staff they've done their film study might be excited about Javelin Guidry. So that'll be an interesting training camp battle to watch. We lumped the defensive backs all into one. So we talked about the corners. We're going to come back to them when we look at the unit as a whole. And while the cornerback position is fairly weak, or maybe just a big question mark, safety position, not too bad on this team. I'm not too low on this position for the Jets. I think that's going to help out the corners quite a bit between the pass rush and a good veteran safety group. I think, the Jets defensive backs will benefit and won't be as awful as, they might be on paper. When you look at the safety position, obviously the number one guy, Marcus Maye, team captain, been here longer than anybody else. Seems to be beloved in the locker room. The Jets this week did not extend him. It seems like the two sides couldn't come to a deal. Do you think the Jets will regret not locking him up during this time period? Obviously, they still can't. They could franchise him again after the season. They could negotiate a deal after the season for him. But do you think the Jets will regret not sending that message of taking care of a team captain, a homegrown talent?
I think that is the risk with this. The concern I do have is that, they did come out right away. Robert Saleh was talking about getting guys paid and wanting to be there for players. So I thought it was really important to sign him to live up to that message, especially after you just restructured Crowder and showed a little bit of, just playing around with money there. I thought it was important to get this one locked up so you could send that message and kind of live up to your word. So I think that is the one downside to this, but I do think there's some overreaction to not re-signing May. And I think it just comes down to the fact that as a team, you're afforded this luxury of having the franchise tag, which is a very team-friendly tool. And of course you should want to use it. Obviously there are things in terms of the off-field aspects, like we just talked about with the perception and everything that come along with using it. But the league gives you that option to use the franchise tag, to have that flexibility. Why not go ahead and use it? See how Marcus Maye plays in a new defense. See how he plays as he approaches his 30s, and come back and talk again next year. And you have a guy in Ashton Davis who just drafted in the 3rd round. See how he plays. If he plays well and you can come out this year comfortable that Davis can replace him long term as a cheaper player still in his rookie contract, there's financial flexibility 101 for you. So I think it's a little bit of overreaction, because from a team perspective, it makes perfect sense to try to maximize that franchise tag. But at the same time, I think there is a little bit of, it is a legitimate question mark as to the message it sends for kind of penny pinching with probably the leader in your locker room right now. He is one of the longest tenured players on the team, and best players, most respected players. So there is a question mark there that is legitimate, I think. But also at the same time, I think that it's also worth considering that I think it's fair that the Jets are not overpaying for him. I think a lot of fans seem to think, oh, it's just a couple million, just whatever, just re-sign him, go up to his number, find middle ground. But we've seen Joe Douglas is not that kind of general manager. He has a line in the sand that he's not going to cross. And sometimes it's going to hurt, but in the long run, that's going to make you a financially responsible team that's not going to waste money and is not going to not going to invest more money into a player than his talent says he's worth. And in the case of Marcus Maye, I think he is a very good player, probably top 10, 15 safety in the league, but the Jets don't see him at his age and in terms of the overall impact that he has, as worthy of paying $12, $13 million a year, like some of the top safeties in the league. I do think they valued him. Apparently it was, based on what Rappaport said, 20% below the franchise tag mark. So eight and a half million, probably a little bit less than I would think he's worth. But that's just the way that the Jets have done business. And I think using the franchise tag for 1 year is a fair thing to do. So there are positives and negatives with it, but I do understand their perspective. But in terms of on field, you're getting a really good player. I don't think you're getting a star. I do think I posted some plays and I made an article about some plays where Marcus Maye was beat last year and should have given up a touchdown, but was lucky about a bad throw. And I think some people were saying like you could do that for every player, which of course you can, But I think with Marcus Maye, it did happen a little bit more often last season than is typical. There were at least 4 plays, just off the top of my head, in which he was beat for what would have been a long, long touchdown. We're talking 40 plus yards, in which the throw was just missed, or someone up front created pressure to make the throw miss. That's a lot for a safety. And he also did give up 4 touchdowns as it is, which was near the top of the league for safeties. So it's not as if his production in terms of touchdowns was still good. Um, so I think it is worth considering that. May was a little bit lucky last season, and that his perception could be a little bit different if a few different plays went a different way. But still, overall, I think the his outlook should be tempered a little bit. I don't think he's quite as good as the 4th best safety in the league, like his PFF grade, but I think he's top 10 to 15. He does a lot of different things well. He's a good run defender, good tackler. For the most part, he does miss some tackles, but he makes some really good open field finishes. Good on ball playmaker and coverage. For Pretty good communicator, plays his role well, doesn't blow a ton of coverages, although he does blow a few more than I think a lot of people realize. Very good player, and he's going to be good to have around that young cornerback room. He's going to help them quite a bit. But I think that would be my pretty much take on the whole thing.
How do you feel he and Marcus Joyner, who at this time seems like they're going to be the 2 starters at the safety position, how do you think they work in this system? Who plays more free safety? Who plays more strong safety? I mean, how do they both fit into this scheme?
Well, based on what Robert Saleh said, it does seem like that Joyner is primarily going to be your free safety, and Marcus Maye your strong safety in this defense. Although I think in general, um, in most defenses, those designations aren't as rigid as a lot of people treat them. Every team is pretty versatile and moves their guys around a lot at every position. But obviously that varies. Some defenses are very strict with those designations, some aren't. And I think this is one of those. The Niners did mix up their coverages quite a bit in 2019 when they were at their peak. Everyone was healthy. They ran a lot of quarters coverage. Relatively, they ran quarters, so 4 deep, 18% of the time. That was 5th highest in the league. That was their highest ranking out of cover 1, 2, 3, and cover 4 or quarters. Cover 1, 32%. That was 23rd. Cover 3, 20.3%. That was 16th. And cover 2, 15%. That was 15th. So fairly middle of the pack in a lot of these. They don't lean towards anything particularly strongly, or at least they didn't when Salah was leading that defense. So there's going to be a lot of interchangeability. We'll see them both deep sometimes. But I think for the most part, Joyner is going to be staying downfield, and Marcus Maye is going to be playing more of those box roles, more so like he was at the beginning of last season versus the rest of the year. And personally, I think Maye is better as a deep safety than a strong safety. So we'll see how that works out. He had he missed a lot of tackles as a strong safety to start last season. But that Bills game to open the season did show us how dominant he can be in that role. He didn't keep that up over the next few games in which he played that position, but he did show us that he's capable of that level of production. So the potential is certainly there, and his versatility allows him to do a lot of different things. That's probably his best trait. You can feel good about him doing pretty much anything that you would need your safety to do. So I think there will be a good amount of interchangeability, but like Salah designated it, I think primarily Joyner is your deep guy who's going to be staying back there for the majority of his snaps, and Maye is going to be more so roaming around, but he'll be deep plenty as well.
Yeah, I think with Marcus Maye, you made a really good point in the fact that the Jets are going to be using him differently this year. And, last training camp, and like you said, week 1, he looked good in that strong safety role. And I think you're right. I think he'll get to play both. I agree with you. I think Marcus Maye is at his best when he's roaming the center of the field or playing back. And certainly in a cover 2 defense, he's going to get plenty of times where he gets to just sit back and watch the quarterback. But yeah, he's going to be 29 next year. He plays a non-premium position. We haven't seen him in this new role and how they're going to balance him and Ashton Davis and the Marcus Joyner. I mean, there's plenty of questions, and obviously you'd like to take care of your team players, and obviously he's a veteran, but I don't blame the Jets for not overpaying for him. I think $8 million is a little low, but let's see how the season turns out. Let's say, hey, if he gets injured, you just never know. He did miss his entire second season for the most part, not his entire second season, but missed a considerable amount of games his second year in the league. There's just question marks. So I'm not going to criticize Joe Douglas for that. And like you said, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the Jets use both of them, because I think Marcus Maye, definitely between him and Joyner, is the better strong safety, but I think Marcus Maye is probably the better free safety. And that brings in the Jets' third safety, Ashtyn Davis, who I think some thought might be able to push to start the season. I would still expect him to start games this year just due to injuries, and I'm sure he'll play his fair share of snaps outside of just special teams. What are your thoughts on his projection into this defense? I mean, do you see him, look, if the Jets play May and Davis, I think Davis naturally coming out had more of the skill set to be more of a free safety, but we saw him have considerable success at strong safety, I mean, particularly that Patriots game. Granted, that may have just been, he was a rookie. He wasn't necessarily in the position to play more free safety. It seems like he was getting lost a little bit and wasn't, but when he was in the box, he was just able to rely on his athletic talents. He's a little undersized there. But what do you think of Ashton Davis and how he fits into this defense and potentially fits with Marcus Maye and LaMarcus Joyner?
Well, it's something I'm definitely interested to see, because I think there's a misconception about Salah's 49ers defense that they ran a lot of three safety looks, but they didn't do that at all. So I don't know where that idea sort of came from. I just did an article should be coming out soon, but I just did a study running through how the 49ers distributed their snaps in the defensive backfield over the last two seasons. And it was pretty strictly just two every down safeties every game. And they would almost never use another safety in addition to the starters. So it's not something that they did. That doesn't mean that they can't adjust based on the talent, because that is part of Salah's appeal, his adaptability, his ability to change. So of course they can do it, but it's not something that he did do with the 49ers. And Ulbrich with the Falcons, they didn't do it either. They actually did do it a little bit more than the Niners did, but still, for the most part, the Falcons were doing the same thing. Two starting safeties, and they did not use anyone else in addition to that, unless there were injuries. So it's not something that either of these guys did with their previous teams, so it would be new. But I feel like Davis might just be relegated to being a backup safety who there might not be too many snaps available for. It's tough to play three safety looks in the NFL, because you need another cornerback out there to play against these heavy wide receiver looks, 11 personnel, 10 personnel, so you can match that speed. So it's a tough thing to do. I think if Davis is going to get snaps, it's going to have to come sort of in that will linebacker role. Not that he'd be doing it all the time, but I think that if you really want to get him on the field, then 5-10 snaps a game, maybe you can put him out there and stand him up on the edge at outside linebacker, which he did a lot of when he moved to strong safety last year in that Patriots game, especially. He was doing a lot of lining up at outside linebacker, standing up on the edge. And I feel like that is a role where you can get him in there, because beyond the two starting linebackers, Mosley and Davis, presumably Davis will be starting with him. Then beyond that, it's just going to be a rotation. Typically, you have 4-3 defenses have a third guy who plays about 30% of the snaps, but you could distribute that. The Jets have a lot of candidates to play that role between Cashman, Sherwood, Nasruddin, and they also have a guy in Ashton Davis who has shown he could play well in the box and has some athleticism you want to take advantage of, and fits into this defense's goal of speed and athleticism at the linebacker position and just in general across the unit. So those snaps can be distributed. Play the rookie linebackers a little bit. Play Cashman a little bit if you want some more size. Play Davis if you really want speed to get a blitzer in there. And he could also play some slot corner. He showed you he can do that. So I do think there is not going to be a third safety role in this defense, just because they haven't done that the last 2 years. But I think there are ways to get him on the field. So we'll see if they do that, or if he is just a backup safety.
Yeah, I think you touched on it a little bit. I think Davis is the biggest thing he brings to this defense is versatility. And you said, look, it's going to be hard to play 3 safeties in this league. I agree with that, but I think while you're saying the Jets could use him at linebacker or whatnot, I think Ashton Davis might be the leading contender when the Jets are in dime, when they have to go up against 10 personnel. I think you could put Ashton Davis in there and play him as your second slot corner. I think he certainly has the athleticism to do that. I think the Jets, I mean, look, Ashton Davis was a pick who was essentially best player available because when he was drafted, the Jets had both Jamal Adams and Marcus Maye, and he was probably seen as the Marcus Maye replacement. And the reason the Jets took him was because it was the beginning of the 3rd round, and Davis was a guy that many people had a round 1 grade on, a late round 1, at the latest a round 2 grade, and he fell all the way to round 3, so the Jets took him. So, I'm not particularly high on Ashton Davis myself, but his pedigree is there, and I think he's going to get plenty reps. I think the Jets are going to find ways to use him. And look, every draft pick doesn't need to be a home run starter. I think you just want the fewest amount of Ardarius Stewarts and Christian Hackenbergs and guys you take, particularly on day 2, that just don't do anything. And if Ashton Davis's career is defined by his athleticism, his ability to help out on special teams, to be that depth and be your 3rd safety, it's not a terrible 3rd round pick, honestly. I mean, that when you look at the rest of the 3rd round, that would probably be you would consider that a win, I guess, a solid 3rd round pick. But I think the expectation with Davis is because he has that pedigree, because he has that late 1st round, potential, I think the Jets are going to try to play him. I think they're going to try to use him, like you said, be versatile with him, play him at linebacker, weak linebacker, play him at slot corner. I think between Marcus Maye and LaMarcus Joyner, somebody's going to go down at some point in the season. So I think you're going to see him plenty of times. And he has the versatility to play both free safety and strong safety. So I like Ashton Davis, and I think the Jets should try to give him as many looks as possible. And who knows, maybe you can phase LaMarcus Joyner out, but by the end of the season, if Davis is performing well, and your starters could be Maye and Davis, which then the whole who's the free safety, who's the strong safety becomes a little more interchangeable. Rounding out the safeties, Sherrod Niesman, JT Hassel, and Bennett Jackson. Michael, out of the 3 of those guys, which one do you think makes the final roster?
I think Niesman is going to make the team. He's a guy who pretty much nobody's talked about, at least from my perspective, but probably should be talked about a little bit more. I think he is going to be a valuable depth piece for this defense. I think Niesman is a really good example of what a good depth piece looks like. You can't expect too much from a backup. That's why they're a backup. But if you can have a backup who A, can contribute on special teams, which Niesman does, and B, has shown multiple times that he can come in and play at a competent level, not great, not good, just competent, like a league average level, then I think that's a valuable backup. And that's what Niesman has done for the Falcons. I talked about him a little bit earlier, comparing him to Echols as potentially what his long-term role could be. But he was never a primary starter for them. But the Falcons had a lot of injuries at safety, and he was called upon multiple times in different spurts. And he, over the long run, played like a league average player. And that's the most that you can realistically expect out of a backup, and particularly in coverage. And also he is really versatile. He's able to play free safety. He can play in the box. Kind of has that size to where he can do both at 6 foot 200. So he's a good backup. I think he's exactly what you want in a backup. Has the Jeff Ulbrich connection. Played with the Falcons over the last 5 years, so he's been in that defense. Has a shared experience with Ulbrich in terms of his terminologies and philosophies. So a lot to like with Sherrod Niesman for me. I think he's going to make this roster and provide good value as a backup.
Yeah, I think that's all you're looking for. He's this year's Matthias Farley, and Farley was a fairly good special teamer. He was a special teams captain. Couldn't really bring anything on defense, and I think that's kind of what you're
I think better though, because like Farley was not good on defense. When he came in, he was bad. But I think Niesman can come in and be okay, and that's really all you could hope for.
Do you think, and as we transition to the DB group as a whole, because there's 2 trains of thought, and I think we discussed this maybe a little bit on a previous podcast, but because the Jets are so bad at corner or unproven, I should say, and because, like you said, everybody's kind of in the same boat, do you think it lends the Jets to keeping more corners because you're kind of just looking at multiple guys and hoping one of them hits? Or do you think just the lack of talent, or I guess proven talent, makes them keep less corners, maybe only 5 corners, and maybe they go up to 4 or 5 safeties or something like that. How do you think the Jets balance their corner and safety final roster, and who do you think ultimately makes the team?
That's a really good question because it goes both ways. Because on one hand, like you said, um, you're throwing so many darts at the dartboard. You're just hoping to hit the bullseye once with one of these guys. So in that respect, you would want to keep as many guys as possible so you could have all those chances. But then on the other hand, then you're stocking up on talent at the weakest position on your roster. And, there are probably guys at other positions who you'd be leaving off the roster in favor of one of these undrafted or late round players. Well, particularly the undrafted guys. You assume all the rookies will make the team. But you could be sacrificing a better player just for the sake of having more shots at the dartboard here, cornerback. But I do think that is the approach that they want to have here. I think they understand that they don't have any premium investments here. You have no first round picks, no second round picks, not even a third round pick or a fourth round pick. So I think they know that, and they want to take as many shots as possible. And they're confident in their defensive coaching staff. Tony Oden, their cornerbacks coach, has done a great job. He developed Darius Slay, Xavier Howard, helped Jason Verrett last year. I think they're confident in that defensive coaching staff. Ricky Manning also was there for Shaq Griffin's rookie season with the Seahawks. So I think they're confident in that defensive coaching staff. I think they want to invest in this idea of having a lot of young corners, giving them chances, seeing who they can find to stick as their long-term pieces. I think they're invested in that idea. So I feel like they are going to lean pretty heavily into keeping more cornerbacks. You look at the Niners last year, they only kept 5 corners and 4 safeties. I think they'll match the safety number. I think it'll be Maye, Joyner, Davis, and Sherrod Niesman. At cornerback, though, I could see them maybe going 1 or maybe even 2 beyond the 5. I think you'll have Bryce Hall, Bless Austin, the 3 rookies. So that'd be 5, Pinnock, Echols, and Carter the second. And I think Isaiah Dunn will make the team as well. So that'll be Evan Guidry. So I guess there you go. I can see 7. Although I guess Dunn there, Isaiah Dunn would be the question mark there. Would he make the team? And if he does he knock out Guidry or Bless Austin? Because 7 is a lot. But I do think
You're also forgetting about Justin Hardy.
And Justin Hardy was in the mix too. You're right. Even though he won't play defense, is technically in this cornerback room. So this is going to be tough. I think there is going to be a surprise cut here now that we're breaking it down. But I do think they will lean pretty heavily. So I guess if I had to rattle off a prediction right now, 3 rookies, Bryce Hall, man, now that I'm sort of looking at it, I feel like Bless Austin might have to go.
Well, no.
I don't know.
Well, he's not a lock.
Regime. He's not a pick of this regime. You have 3 rookies you got to keep.
You don't
Bryce
have
Hall
to keep all
staying.
3 rookies. Let's get that clear. Brandon Echols could get the bounce. He's a 6th-round rookie. But it doesn't mean that he's not going to be on the team. You cut him and try to put him on your practice squad. I'm not saying that's what they're going to do with Echols, but I don't think. But
is
Echols
Bryce Hall
is a lock.
is Bless Austin that valuable to where you would cut one of your own rookies and risk losing him?
No, I think you cut Justin Hardy before you cut
Bless
Austin. Yeah, I like Justin Hardy. I have him keeping 7 corners and 4 safeties, which seems a little high. So, especially when you see that San Francisco only had 5. Now that I look at it, I could see Niesman getting the axe. That's tough.
Let's just
I think it's going to be
Isaiah Dunn won't make it.
You know what?
He has a chance, but like if we have to pick one, we have to go with the undrafted free agent.
No, I disagree with that. You know what I think it is? I think Niesman doesn't make the team. I think Justin Hardy does.
He's my guy. He's making the team.
I think they're going to choose between one specialist. I mean, look, the fact that Hardy doesn't really bring you much as a corner may give him the axe, but the fact that he was a free agent signing, it seems like Brant Boyer really likes him. He's a good special teamer. I think he probably does stick on the team. And then I think that might cut Niesman. And look, Echols has the athleticism to play safety. Yeah, I mean, you could use Echols at safety if you really needed to. I mean, I think he's the best guy out of those 6 or those 7. So I think you can go into the season with 7 safeties. And look, I believe they're keeping the same practice squad
7
rules from
corners,
last
you
year's.
mean, right?
Yeah. I believe they're keeping the same practice squad regulations as last year, right?
Yeah.
So they could go and stash Niesman on their practice squad. Also, the chances are that there's going to be an injury at this unit. And so if there's an injury, an injury where I should, while you stall for a second, I should double check that they're keeping the IR regulations from last year as well. But look, if there's a guy who gets injured and it's like, hey, it's going to be a 4-week injury, they can stash him in the IR and then play that whole game. It's really interesting. I mean, before this podcast, the 7 I had were Hall, Austin, Carter II, Pinnock, Echols, Dunn, and Hardy, and then the safeties, Maye, Joyner, Davis, and Niesman. But the fact that they kept 5 corners last year, I think they'll go 6th. Yeah, there's a tough cut there between Justin Hardy and Niesman. And so right now I'll give Hardy the edge and cut Niesman.
Yeah, that could happen. I guess let me just throw out one more prediction. I'll just rattle it off. So we'll keep Bryce Hall and obviously Hall. We'll keep Bless Austin. We'll keep the 3 rookies. That's 5. Hardy's 6. I guess, is that where we're gonna leave it off? We're gonna leave.
I already said mine. I'm keeping 7 and only 3 safeties.
There's gonna be some tough decisions to make here for sure. That's my main takeaway from this segment here.
Here's how I view it. Hardy is a defensive back who's not going to play defense. And I think the Jets already had that last year, but they just had him at safety and Matthias Farley. So I think when you look at it, if you just do DBs as a whole, you get one guy that is going to be primarily a special teamer. And I think that's Justin Hardy. So that's why I think Niesman gets the axe. I know you like him, look, yeah, if Isaiah Dunn struggles or Brandon Echols really struggles, I think one of them could get cut and placed in the practice squad, and then they keep Niesman. All right, let's move on. We have a few more questions here, and then we'll wrap this up. I mean, you were just about to cut Bless Austin, but he seems to be the favorite to start at that cornerback 2 spot. Who do you think is the best scheme fit out of all the competitors? And I guess when you look at the field, I would say right now I'm pretty certain Bryce Hall is going to start. All signs point to Michael Carter II starting in the slot. So it's just that second corner. It's between Bless Austin, Jason Pinnock, Brandon Echols, and Isaiah Dunn. I mean, you could throw Lamar Jackson in there as well, I guess, or, Zane Lewis and all those guys. But I would say that the main competitors are Austin, Pinnock, and Dunn, and we'll throw Echols in there as well. So out of those 4, who do you think is the best scheme fit?
I'm going to go with Pinnock. I think he really does fit this scheme well with his size, also his press coverage experience. He did a lot of press with Pitt last year, 75% of his coverage snaps. That was the highest portion in the country among cornerbacks with at least 100 cover snaps. And that's a big part of his defense. I think a lot of people associate press coverage with man-to-man. And there's different varieties of it. There is press man, but another big part of press coverage is press bail when you press the line and then drop back into zone. And that is a pretty big fixture in this defense. And it's something Pinnock has done a lot of. So I think that makes him a good fit as well. So I'm going to go with Pinnock. But in general, I think the Jets have done a really good job of finding guys who fit their scheme. And I think that's kind of one of the things you can do when you build your team this way. Because when you're taking so many late round guys and you're taking so many shots, you could sacrifice a little bit of talent and just find guys who fit your scheme. Because at this point, at day 3 of the draft, undrafted free agency, it's such a crapshoot. Everyone is sort of so much in the same pool where it's like, let's just emphasize scheme fit first and foremost, and then go from there. Whereas, when you're signing the biggest free agents, or if you're drafting guys at the top of the draft, sometimes you might sacrifice scheme fit a little bit to get the best talent available, or even sacrifice needs, because you're like, let's just get the best player. This guy's really talented, and we'll figure it out from there. Maybe we'll even mold it to him. Whereas when you build the team this way, I think you can value scheme fit a lot more. And I think they have done a good job of that. Really, for the most part, I think a lot of these guys are good fits. Echols is the one guy who I'm sort of concerned about where he's going to fit. Not necessarily because of scheme, but I just don't know where his home is, because he is small to play the outside, which is what he played in college. But he's also not necessarily fit to play inside because of some of his issues with change of direction, quickness. So I think Echols is one question mark. But other than that, the Jets have a lot of guys who are tall, long, willing tacklers, and fit the scheme pretty well. And in terms of the slot guys, MC Squared and Javelin Guidry, I think they fit what you want in the slot pretty well. So I think they've done a good job from a scheme fit standpoint.
So we've established that you think Hall, Pinnock, and Carter II will be the starting three, correct?
I think so. I mean, I feel like Guidry can push Carter. That's a really close one for the slot. We'll roll with that.
I don't think Guidry has a spot in this roster. If you're going to keep all three of those rookies, there's no chance that Guidry has a spot in this roster unless I think Brandon Echols is not a lock like you think. I do not think
That's
Brandon
fair.
Echols is a lock.
Maybe you're right. Maybe Echols is that odd man out.
And I also think
Guidry
I
can stay.
also think you can stash Guidry on the practice squad as well. I generally feel like teams or fans overestimate their own team's scrap heap and think that there's 31 other teams that are going to be salivating all over these players. But I'm going to be honest, the Jets cut a corner. I don't imagine many teams being interested in claiming him. Certainly that can change. I know Javelin Guidry does have some fans around the league, but you have to remember somebody has to get cut to add him on this final 53. I think Guidry has a chance to get signed elsewhere, but I think they can probably stash him on the practice squad. But the point being, if we're going to say Pinnock, Hall, and Carter II are your week 1 starting three, do you think this changes by week 18? Not just ignore injuries. I mean, obviously the injuries will happen, but do you think by the time we reach the last week of the season when the Jets are winding down their 2021, in fact, they'll be in 2022 at that point, do you think there'll be some major developments at this cornerback spot?
I think.
And safety. And safety.
I think so. I feel like I could definitely see Pinnock struggling a lot and getting benched. And that doesn't necessarily end his career. Bless Austin got benched in his rookie season. And no, he didn't have a good second year, but he still got the opportunity to start the next season. So I could see Pinnock really struggling and getting benched. And the same thing for Carter II in the slot. Perhaps I think he's less likely to struggle than any of the other rookies, but it could happen for him as well. I could definitely see because rookies can struggle to the point where it gets really out of hand. For the most part, with veterans, if they struggle, they'll play badly, and there are exceptions to this. We've seen plenty with the Jets, but rookies, the floor tends to be much lower, so they could get to the point where they're just really struggling to the point where you can't play the game with them because they're really killing you. So I could see that for one of these two rookies, and then just someone else gets thrown in there and gets a chance. Maybe another one of the rookies like Echols, maybe Bless Austin comes back into the starting lineup, or vice versa with him and Jason Pinnock. I do see the starting lineup changing based on players struggling throughout the season and giving other players opportunities.
I agree. I mean, I think my starting three and my starting five, mainly my starting three is different. I do think Bless Austin will open up the season as a starter alongside Hall and Carter II, but I think by the end of that season, I want to say Pinnock, but I have this feeling about Isaiah Dunn. I don't know. Maybe it's just because, I have a soft spot for the Beavs and Oregon State. I just have a feeling that Isaiah Dunn is going to make some plays. But between Pinnock and Dunn, and Dunn, I feel like somebody is going to upset Bless Austin. I think Bless Austin will struggle and, not necessarily take the leap that some of us thought he would after his first season. I also think that Ashtyn Davis will take over for LaMarcus Joyner by the end of the season. So I think week 1, you're looking at Joyner and Bless Austin both starting, but by week 18, I think you're seeing Davis and I'll say Isaiah Dunn starting for this team. I think we're being foolish to just count Bryce Hall as a lock corner one for this team. I think he is the highest ceiling of all these guys, and I think he will be good. I think this is a good scheme for him, and I like him, but he struggled with injuries. He is going into his second season. He's a day 3 rookie. We don't necessarily know what type of player he is at this stage. I think there's a chance that Bryce Hall doesn't last the full 18 weeks. I think he will, but be careful not to overrate Bryce Hall. And I think that's a good segue with 2 questions left, but it's a good segue into this second to last question. As far as the biggest X factor that'll make or break this unit, it has to be Bryce Hall. I mean, as far as just a player, if he can put up, a solid season. I don't even want to say a good season or a great season, just a solid starting corner, starting caliber season. Maybe a season where you say, hey, look, I think he's a definite starting corner in this defense, but maybe he's more cornerback too. If that's that's kind of what you're hoping for, is he can at least prove that he can be a starter. He doesn't have to prove that he's cornerback one, but he can at least prove that, okay, you're comfortable with him manning one of the sides of Robert Saleh's defense. Do you think he's the biggest X factor in determining the success of this unit, or do you think there's something else, somebody or some other factor that is a bigger X factor?
I wish I could have a more creative answer, but I think it definitely is him, because I think he has the highest ceiling of this group, just because he established a pretty good base for himself last season, whereas everyone else is working off, they're either a rookie or, in Austin's case, struggled last season. So I think Hall does have the highest realistic ceiling, highest chance of being a good above average starter this season. So I think that definitely makes him the biggest X factor in this unit. But I guess everyone else would sort of be grouped into the second X factor. Can you get, in addition to Hall, assuming Hall can at least be okay, just a starter, like you said, can just one other guy be a good starter, whether it's one of the slot guys or the other starting outside corner? Can just one person step up and be at least a competent starter? That would be huge as well. But I think, like you said on Hall, and the point of him being the assumed starting quarterback, I think you're right. I think we do need to allow him to earn that first, because this is even in the early goings of OTAs and minicamp, we've seen that Saleh really wants guys to earn their spot on the depth chart on this team. Like, even with Mims just missing some time due to injury, comes back and is on second team. Doesn't tell us anything about what they think of him or what their plans are. It's just that, we're early in the offseason. This is a new regime. You miss some time, go earn your spot. And then same thing applies here. Maybe you were starting last season, but you got to earn it now. So I think that Hall is going to have to earn it. And if he has an awful preseason, awful training camp, maybe he won't start. There's not necessarily anything that should guarantee that he will. He only started, I believe, 7 games last year, and he was a 5th-round pick. And he wasn't amazing. I think he was good. So he shouldn't necessarily be guaranteed a starting spot. But with all that being said, I think it is very likely he starts, just because, again, he was good last season. He was a pretty solid starter. And for a rookie, that's a really good starting point. He's a great pedigree coming out of college. And I think he is probably the most talented cover guy in this group. So I think there is a good chance he starts, but at the same time, like you said, let's allow him to earn it first. He's a guy with 7 starts under his belt. So let's allow him to earn it, but I think it is likely he starts.
Last question for you, and this is the question everybody wants to know. Where does Michael Nania think this Jets defense ranks in passing defense?
I put out, I'm going to have to find it so I don't sound like I'm just
I have
all
an
over
answer
the
for
place.
you. I have an answer for you. 2017 was Robert Saleh's first season as defensive coordinator for the 49ers. And it wasn't an amazing season by any stretch. I believe they were 32nd or not 32nd. They were 25th in yards allowed, I believe, total yards allowed. But their passing defense that year, and keep in mind, their starting corners were Kelly Witherspoon and Deontay Johnson. And Witherspoon was a rookie at that point, a 3rd-round rookie. Similar situation, similar philosophy. A bunch of young guys that just play them, see who sticks. Witherspoon eventually did, but he did a solid season this last year. Good example of a guy, you play him young, they can develop into somebody you can rely on. Despite that, and their safeties, by the way, Eric Reed and Jimmy Ward. So Reed is pretty solid. I think Ward was also a 1st-round pick a few years before that, but not great. Despite that, passing touchdowns, San Francisco 49ers were 9th in allowed, and which is fairly high, I guess I would say. And they were also 11th in yards allowed. So I think that's kind of a fair baseline. I think the Jets' safety position is better off. So I guess I would say passing defense, I'll say the Jets are 21st. I think they're going to be low 20s. So I don't think they're going to be the absolute worst in the league. I think the safety position and their pass rush will help them out a lot. But I think ultimately, I think they'll still struggle. I think that cornerback 2 spot will still need some work. I think Michael Carter II will struggle in the slot. I think Bryce Hall is far from perfect. But I think, by the end of the season, they'll get things together a little bit. But the other thing to keep in mind here, is the Jets don't play that many elite quarterbacks, which will help. But I still think passing defense, they're probably low 20s. And I think they'll have a fairly high rushing defense, and I think they'll get after it on the sacks. But just there's too many unknowns at this cornerback spot to rank them any higher. Michael, what do you think?
Okay, so I found my prediction. I'm a lot more optimistic than you with this overall pass defense. I had 12th. I think the pass rush is good enough to overcome the coverage in the secondary to still make this an above average pass defense. I think this can be the second or third best pass rush in the league. I'm that confident in that group. The cornerbacks, on the other hand, I do think this is going to be somewhere around probably a bottom 5 to 10 unit. So that's why I think I'm going to find that middle ground. I think the pass rush is elite. The safety position is good. At linebacker, you have definitely some question marks, but you do have CJ Mosley there. So I think they have enough to overcome the cornerbacks and still be good, but the cornerbacks are going to hold them back from being elite, because I think with the core they have up front, and then also you have, even at other positions, 3 other good players in Maye, Joyner, and Mosley. The potential is there for you to be elite if you can just be okay at cornerback. I don't think that's going to happen, so that will hold them back from being elite. But I think they have enough with the pass rush, and then also Mosley, Maye, and Joyner to still be good. So 12th is where I'm going to settle in with the pass defense, but the cornerbacks are definitely going to struggle.
You convinced me a little bit. I'll raise it because I think I'm not going to raise it that much. But I think it's important to note. So I found I was stammering there a little bit because I was trying to find the exact ranking. So the 49ers were ranked 22nd in passing defense in 2017. And they were also, they only had 30 sacks, which was towards the bottom half of the league. I do think the Jets crack 40 sacks. So, I'll put them at 17. I'll go low teens. I just think the cornerback unit is too weak to rank them any higher. I don't want to be too optimistic. Certainly, I think with the pass rush and the safety group, and if somebody in this cornerback room hits, they could be a lot higher. But right now, I'll give them low teens, early 20s is my expectation for them. Michael, I think that's going to do it for us in this defensive back version of the positional breakdown. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. You can follow Michael _Nania, myself at Ben W. Blessington. Feel free to rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. Go to jetsxfactor.com for the best Jets content around. Michael, any last thoughts on the secondary?
Well, I do have one question for you.
Okay.
So the year is 2021. This podcast debuted in 2019. So this is our 3rd year doing this podcast. Would you consider us veteran podcasters?
Well, I had a podcast for longer, so I'm definitely veteran. First year I was March of 2016. So I think
you meet my criteria.
I meet your criteria. You're still a rookie, I guess. Or see, that doesn't make any sense. Michael's like, if you have a podcast for a year, if you've been doing something for a year, you're no longer a rookie, you're a veteran. Now you're a young veteran. Doesn't mean you're a good veteran or a seasoned or reliable or whatever veteran, but you're a veteran. I think you just have a misunderstanding of the word and you're using
I don't think it's not a misunderstanding. It's just a higher standard of what I consider to make someone experienced in their field. It's just subjective. Your take on it is perfectly okay. You're allowed to see it how you want to see it. That's okay.
Update on the
I'm not going to try and convince you. But this is just how I see it. I see veterans as older players.
Damn near 800 votes on this. 50% agree with Michael. 5+ seasons. 41% agree with me.
51%. Let's round it up. It's 50.6.
Okay. 10% difference right now. I think I shouldn't have included who said what because all the replies are agreeing with me. Yeah, I mean, Marcus Maye is the best example. I mean, how could that guy not be a veteran? We literally just referred to him in this podcast as a veteran leader of this defense.
I didn't.
You wouldn't refer to him as a veteran leader of this defense?
He can be a leader. He's not a veteran.
Okay, we're going to get out of here. Tweet us what you think. Thank you for listening, everybody. A few weeks away from training camp. We'll have 3 more
Joyner's a veteran. Let me list out all the veterans on the Jets roster.
No, relax.
Right now.
On Thursday, we will have the offensive line preview coming out. Next Monday, a week from today, we'll have the quarterback preview coming out. And then that Thursday, training camp will be underway, and we'll have a training camp preview dropping. Very exciting times. Season just around the corner. Stay with us. Go Jets. Everybody have a great week.